In a lonely town somewhere, Mana had finally turned 15. She is a young girl who has a bit of an attitude. After all, she had been raised by the love and care of the old lady Baba. Mana was given all of her wishes and everything that she wanted whenever she wanted it. She was given everything except the freedom to leave her home. It had been several years now since she had left her home. She hadn't even left her bed, to be honest. Elsewhere, a boy named Yuta is heading straight to the village in search of a mermaid. You might think he is crazy, but it turns out that the whole village filled with women is actually a mermaid village. They have been taking care of Mana for several years and even feeding her their own flesh to keep her alive and pretty. When Yuta finally arrives at the village, he is confronted by several old women by the lake. Before he can explain his presence, the women use large harpoons and stab the man to death. They carefully take the body and throw it into the same cave where they killed their other members to make flesh for Mana to eat. Surprisingly so, moments later, Yuta wakes up. Despite suffering several injuries, he is still alive and sees the mermaid's body lying nearby. He carries the body and rushes to where the old ladies are. The old women, on the other hand, are in Mana's room showering her with compliments and love. When Yuta barges in with the mermaid asking questions, the women are suddenly on their heels. They try to hit him with harpoons once more, but he avoids it and takes Mana hostage. As he points a sickle to Mana's neck, he realizes that she was actually a hostage to these women and her feet were locked inside a wooden cell so that she wouldn't run. Despite this, after realizing that Mana was really special to them, he ties the girl to his back and runs out of the house, evading the women's attack. Mana tries to stop him from abducting her, but Yuta is just too powerful. He takes her to the same cave as before and releases her from the shackles. He also uses the water to wash some of the wounds she had incurred in the earlier escape. Finally, Yuta reveals that he had once eaten mermaid flesh long ago and turned into an immortal. His friends who had eaten it with him had all turned into monsters or died soon after, and only he was left alive. He ran and hid, fearing he would die soon, but he never did. He was married too and never aged, while his wife became old and gray. When she finally passed, she told him to find a mermaid so that he could learn how to reverse his immortality. For 500 years now, Yuta had been traveling alone to find mermaids for this very purpose. Just as he finishes the story, a deformed monster just like his friend, the one that ate the mermaid's flesh, appears. Yuta stabs it with the harpoon and carries Mana out of the cave before it can get them. He leaves Mana to recover outside the cave while he goes to confront the women in hopes to find a cure. When he finally talks to Baba, bargaining Mana's return, they tell him that Mana is one of the many young human girls that they had captured from a nearby human village. Most of the human girls had died when they had eaten the mermaid's flesh and turned into deformed ones, but Mana had survived. Since she did, she would act as the mermaid's food, making them all young and revitalized. That is what they were planning to do. Yuta then shows her that he ate mermaid flesh too and is on a quest to find a cure for his immortality. Baba suggests he cut off his head and die, but Yuta wants to die an old man just like everyone else. Baba scoffs and tells them that might never really happen. After getting all the information he needs, Yuta tries to leave, but the women stab him once again. Mana is also captured and brought to the same place. However, this time, Yuta uses his strength to grab Mana and run away before anything could happen. They yet again head to the same cave because there is nowhere else to go. The cave opens up to the ocean, and that is their only path to escape, but the women soon open the floodgates and flood the cave. They wait at the other end of the cave. When the floodwater finally brings Yuta and Mana to the gate, they are all slammed by the ocean water and convert back to their original mermaid form. Inside the water, they start clawing at Mana's blood and convert into young, beautiful mermaids, but Yuta saves her just before they could eat her. He brings Mana to the shore and grabs the harpoon for his protection as Baba approaches him. She reveals that she is a human who ate human flesh just like them. She tells Yuta that he will never find a cure because such a thing doesn't exist. As Yuta leaves with Mana, he tells her that life as an immortal isn't all bad, although he hopes to become mortal again. Several hundred years ago, in the pirate-infested Sea of Japan, were two pirate clans, Toba and Sakagami. The Toba pirates were led by a girl named Rin, who had a very moral way to look at piracy. She only steals 10% of the cargo passing in the ships, letting her victims leave in peace. While the Sakagai family acts like real-life pirates and slaughters the passengers of cargo ships to loot the entirety of the cargo. One day, Rin and her siblings are by the ocean when they notice another dead body by the shores. This body is of Yuta, and they assume it's the same as the several other dead bodies that have recently washed their shores. They bury Yuta. Rin then returns and talks to her sick father. She too seems to be fascinated by the idea of mermaid flesh and promises that she will get some for her father so that she can see him healthy again. Her father, however, tells her that nothing good can come out of having immortality and never-ending youth. The next day, as Rin and her siblings are by the beach once more, they witness the unthinkable. From the grave they dug yesterday, Yuta emerges like a zombie. He scares them witless at first, but soon manages to calm them down and explain his situation. He explains that he had died several times already, but came back to life every single time. This time, he had drowned in the storm while looking for mermaids on behalf of Sakagami chief's wife Isago. Yuta knows where he can find mermaids, but he decides to stay in the Toba village for a while alongside the Toba Islanders. One day, on their way to the local market, Rin and Yuta come across Isago. Isago instantly recognizes Yuta as the one that she had chosen to search for mermaids, and seeing him alive, stabs him in his hands to see if he had gained immortality. She quickly apologizes and lets them go, but soon follows them back to the Toba camp. When she realizes that Yuta's wounds have healed, she pulls out a sword and demands he reveal the location of the place where he found the mermaids. In the heated debate, she stabs Rin's father, prompting Rin to grab the blade and kill Isago on the spot. Rin then rushes to the place where Yuta described, and Yuta follows. Little do they know this is all a trap set by the Sakagami clan who are following them. Rin and Yuta head to the place where Yuta knows the mermaids would be. They manage to find the mysterious mermaid, and Yuta jumps into the ocean to grab the mermaid and brings it out of the water, only for it to be stabbed to death by the Yakagami pirates. Even Yuta and Rin are captured by the pirates. Yuta is killed once more and thrown into the sea, while Rin is taken to Sakagami Island. While in captivity, Rin is visited by Isago, who apparently hasn't died. She reveals that she is also a mermaid who was captured by the Sakagami pirates, but since she had legs, they thought she was a human. She also states that she was pregnant for the last few years now and wanted the mermaid flesh so that she could finally give birth to her children. Later that day, the Sakagami chief and his goons are having a party after finally succeeding to get the mermaid flesh they were after. However, the chiefly has hoarded all the meat for himself. He calls forth Rin and starts abusing her, bashing her into the floor just to make her submit to his whims. Yuta, however, alive from his recent murder, arrives at the scene. The chief and his men alternately fought Yuta and Rin while they ate the mermaid's flesh. However, many were poisoned by the mermaid's flesh, and the survivors were turned into deformed ones, which soon outnumber Yuta and Rin. Luckily for them, the Toba pirates soon arrive there looking for Rin and battle it out. For a moment, the Sakagami chief thinks that he has gained immortality, but the poison just has a delayed effect on him, and he too starts turning into a massive deformed one. The child then realizes that this was all revenge plotted by Isago, who used them to get the mermaid's flesh for herself. He charges at her as she walks to the nearby cliff and jumps off. Yuta stops the deformed one just in time, but Isago is gone. She converts back to her mermaid form and swims away with her two young children. Back in the present, Yuta and Mana finally arrive at a town, and while chasing after a kitten, Mana gets hit by a truck and is taken to the local hospital run by old Dr. Sheena. When Yuta goes to inquire about his friend, old Dr. Sheena tells the police and Yuta that she survived and wandered away. However, the old doctor had lied and taken the girl's lifeless body back to the house of Sawa and a young woman named Toa. The man was planning to use the dead body to replace Toa's arm. He marks the area to be cut and just begins his incision when suddenly Mana awakens again and the doctor hastily stops. Elsewhere, Yuta searches for Mana all around and realizes that Sheena must have been lying. He goes to the police station to get the location of the old man and discovers that he has gone to a place called the Mermaid Forest, where a local legend says a mermaid is buried. Yuta reaches the place only to find Toa with her white hair shining in the moonlight waiting for him. She calls forth a huge deformed dog and orders it to attack him. The dog manages to kill Yuta pretty soon. The next day, when the sun comes up, Sheena, Tawa, and Sawa are ready to bury the poor guy. However, they notice that this man was alive, so instead, they imprison him. When Yuta awakens, he finds himself imprisoned inside the cell of the house, where Sawa comes to him and explains the whole situation. Their compound, the Mermaid Forest, was home to mermaid flesh and other things that were preserved for centuries by their family. Sawa's older sister, Toa, was really sick one day, and it didn't seem like she would make it. So, Sawa stole some of the mermaid blood from her stash and gave it to her. The blood turned Toa's hair white, and her left hand turned into a deformed structure. Unlike Yuta and Mana, she wasn't really immortal. Her face seemed the same, but her soul was old and wicked. As long as their father was alive, Toa was hidden and trapped in the basement, but when he passed away, she was free and now searching for the mermaid mound. Right then, Toa arrives once more and straps Yuta with the mad dog while she plans this time to not just transplant the hand, but her entire head onto Mana's body so that she no longer has to suffer the pain in her hand. Fearing for Mana's life, Sawa reluctantly reveals the location of the mermaid mound to her sister, and they all head to the place, leaving Yuta to die by the dog's fangs once more. When they finally reach the mound, they see a deformed one right there, and Toa sees what the mermaid flesh can actually do to a human being. Yuta somehow manages to escape the dog as well and arrives at the scene. He warns Toa that eating mermaid flesh may completely transform her into a deformed one. However, Toa reveals that she never really wanted the flesh for herself, she wanted Sawa to have the flesh. It turns out that Sawa was always interested in immortality and the other perks of the mermaid's flesh, and when Toa became ill, she took the chance to experiment on her own sister. The experiment failed and it terrified her, so she continued to live her normal life, got married, had children, all the while poor Toa was trapped alone. So Toa now wanted to take revenge on her sister and grant her the immortality she so dearly wished for. Toa tries to force her sister to have the flesh, but right there the old Sawa has a heart attack and passes away, robbing Toa of her revenge. Toa wails in agony and asks them to burn the whole mermaid mound along with her inside it. With tears in his eyes, Sheena does as he is asked. He was once Toa's fiancé and had planned to take her away, but Toa wished to stay confined, waiting for her revenge. It was all for nothing in the end, but at least she had her peace. This leaves Yuta and Mana with a lot to ponder as they continue their journey. A few days have now passed, and Yuta and Mana are still on their journey around the world to find answers to their lives. On one such day, they both fall off a cliff when Mana goes running after a butterfly. They both fall off the cliff and die. Sometime later, a weird bandaged man appears and finds that Mana is alive and takes her away, leaving Yuta on the cliff. When Mana wakes up, she finds herself in a weird cave and notices that she is beside the strange bandaged man. At first, she is afraid, but soon realizes that this man is actually a deformed one who had not yet lost his mind. The man explains that 40 years earlier, he lived in a fishing village and ate mermaid flesh. He blacked out, and upon regaining his senses, discovered everyone in his village had been killed. Ever since then, he came to live in this cave after noticing what he had become. Mana takes a liking to the man and starts living with him. Elsewhere, an old hunter from the village finds Yuta. He is about to bury and perform a ritual for the man, but Yuta wakes up. He explains his situation, and the hunter realizes that Mana must be taken by the infamous monster Big Eyes. They both go in search of the monster and save Mana. Soon, Yuta and the hunter find Mana and Big Eyes and start firing at them. Big Eyes grabs Mana and takes her inside the cave where Mana sees tons of skeletons of humans that Big Eyes had killed and probably eaten. Before the poor man could explain, the hunter arrives once more and shoots Big Eyes. The monster finally goes berserk and starts attacking everyone around him. Yuta eventually manages to kill the monster. At his death, Big Eyes seems to have regained his mindfulness and thanks Mana for being there for him. Later, Mana ponders that there are all sorts of deformed ones, all sorts of mermaids, and all sorts of Yutas, so she cannot really judge who is good or bad. While fishing with Mana, Yuta has a flashback to 1600, the first year of the Tokugawa shogunate, when he was 120 years old. He recalls an apparently 12-year-old immortal girl called Natsume who works with an old man whom she calls Pa. These two go around town claiming to be immortal and sell mermaid flesh, which is only just fish. Yuta didn't really make much of it at first, but soon he finds an itinerant monk attempting to kill Natsume. Yuta saves the girl just in time and takes her back to Pa. That night, he decides to stay with the two and finds something strange about the girl. She tries to eat Yuta's liver in the middle of the night. Later the next day, the monk comes to Yuta and tells him that after Natsume died, he used a piece of the mermaid's liver to resurrect her for Pa. The monk has decided to end Natsume's existence. She was never really meant to be of this world in the first place. However, he tells Yuta that the ceremony can only be done on a full moon, which is 15 days away, so she asks him to look after the girl until then. At first, Yuta wants to help the monk as well, but then he starts to see just how human Natsume is and changes his mind. He asks her to come with him and live a safe life. However, although Natsume agrees, Pa is unwilling to give away his daughter yet again. Turns out she was his only daughter who died in the war and was revived, and he could no longer afford to lose her. So he shows up to the place where Yuta called Natsume and attacks Yuta. Elsewhere, Natsume is attacked by the monk and he removes her liver. In retaliation, the girl attacks the monk, slicing off his hand, and runs away. She quickly makes her way to where Yuta is and finds Pa, who is devastated to learn of her situation. He could no longer save her, so he decides to die with her. The man takes his daughter and jumps off a cliff. Yuta finds Natsume still alive at the base of the cliff, but she dies in his arms and turns back into bones. With tears in his ears, Yuta carries the poor girl away. Back at the present, Yuta and Mana meet Nanao, a 10-year-old boy by the local river carrying an urn. He appears to have a strange medicine that instantly heals his wounds. Intrigued, they approach him and find out that the boy had escaped from being kidnapped. Yuta and Mana take Nanao home, where Nanao's grandmother shows Yuta and Mana a photograph of Nanao's mother, who does not appear to be the woman Nanao calls mother. Alone, Nanao's mother opens the urn, revealing the skin of a scarred woman's face. The next day, Mana and Nanao see Nanao's mother enter the cellar, but later, the woman from the photo emerges with a bandage on one side of her face. In the cellar, Mana discovers surgical instruments and the skin from the face of Nanao's mother. Meanwhile, Yuta follows Nanao's kidnapper, who meets the woman with the bandage covering a scar. Yuta overhears her call him Nanao, and he calls her mother, but she pushes him over a cliff. Yuta quickly goes to check and finds the man still alive. It turns out that this man is actually Nano from 25 years ago. His mother made him eat mermaid flesh forcibly before he left to be with his father. When he spitted the flesh out, he still gained a few powers, but her mother who ate the stuff became unaged for 25 years. She has now kidnapped his son, who she also called Nanao, and was planning to make him immortal too. Mana is suddenly attacked by the scarred woman and manages to escape, but is wounded by an axe. The woman then painfully removes her own face and attaches the one from the box and reappears as Nanao's mother. Yuta also arrives at the scene to finally put 2 and 2 together, if he hadn't already. Being cornered, the mother grabs Nanao and takes him inside the cellar and tries to feed him the flesh as well. Nanao readily agrees despite all the red flags. However, Yuta manages to stop them just in time. The mother wanted to stop Nano herself, but she couldn't do it. By the end, she had come to regret her actions. She tells Nanao to stay with his father for some time and leaves, and later, the body of a woman is found in a burned-out storehouse. Yuta takes Mana to visit the grave of the Kogure family grave, where 60 years earlier, he knew a kind girl named Nei. Later, when they are separated, Mana then encounters a girl being chased by a man with dogs and intervenes to save her. The girl kills the man with a rock, but Mana is blamed and his associates kill and bury her. Yuta searches for Mana and encounters Sokichi, an old man who was Nei's servant as a boy. Sokichi tells Yuta that everyone believed that Nei had left with Yuta, abandoning her fiancé Eijiro. However, Yuta doesn't remember taking Nei anywhere with him since he didn't want her to suffer living alongside him. Meanwhile, Mana revives and discovers that Eijiro has kept Nei confined on his estate, looking perpetually young, but without any knowledge of her past. Meanwhile, Yuta is captured by Eijiro's men and knocked unconscious, and he recalls the story of a traveling nun that Nei told him. Nei told him how a traveling nun left mermaid ashes which Nei used to create the Red Valley, a field of perennially blooming red flowers. When Yuta awakes, Eijiro tells him that he found Nei's body in the Red Valley, and Yuta tells him another version of the story of mermaid ashes in which a villager killed a nun to steal the ashes, but the nun came back to life and killed many of the villagers. Similar to the nun, Nei kills some of Eijiro's men and leaves with Mana following her. Eijiro orders his men to recapture Nei unharmed, but to decapitate Yuta and Mana. Sokichi helps Yuta escape, and they drive to the Red Valley. He reminds Yuta of a signal of arranged stones Yuta devised with Nei to meet in the Red Valley on the day he was to depart. Yuta denies that he gave the signal and suspects that someone else did. Eijiro and his men catch up with 2 girls and stabs Nei with his cane sword. He admits that he set the stone signal to test Nei's loyalty to him. When she arrived to leave with Yuta, Eijiro killed her in a jealous rage. Eijiro had planned to revive Nei with the mermaid's ashes, but could not find them. He explains that for decades he searched for the ashes, and after finally finding them, he used them to revive Nei's still pristine corpse laying in the Red Valley. Mortally wounded, Nei staggers into the Red Valley and remembers that Eijiro killed her there. Meanwhile, Yuta and Sokichi have escaped Eijiro's men and arrive at the Red Valley as well. They manage to take down the guards and subdue Eijiro. Yuta embraces Nei, and as she finally recalls the events of the past, she dies in his arms. Yuta and Mana encounter a boy called Masato who is traveling from Tokyo to live with his mother. The young boy is traveling alone, which intrigues the two, and they tell him that he is doing a great job before parting ways. One night, 2 years later, Masato stabs his mother in the chest, then cleans up the murder scene. However, the next morning when the housekeeper Yuki arrives, Masato's mother is alive again. At a nearby seaside, a nearby construction site where Yuta and Mana are working, Yuta learns about a mysterious body that washed ashore and how after Masato's mother died in a boat accident, she came back to life. So he decides to give this strange woman a visit. At the house, Masato's mother notices that her chest wound isn't healing and attacks Masato, demanding mermaid flesh. She grabs a knife and is about to attack the boy, but Yuta arrives on time and saves him. It seems that only Yuki, the housekeeper, is actually worried about the young boy, but soon she too is about to be married. Before the wedding, she goes to Yuta and asks him to look after the boy. She then goes to give her final goodbye to Masato. However, there is a secret that no one knows. Masato gives Yuki a piece of mermaid flesh, hoping to make her immortal, but she becomes a deformed instead and attacks Masato and his mother. Yuta and Mana arrive in time, and while Mana runs away with the kid, Yuta manages to kill the monster, but then realizes that it was Yuki. Mana escapes to safety with Masato, who leads her to his hiding place. Meanwhile, Masato's mother tells Yuta that the immortal Masato gave her mermaid flesh after a Pacific War bombing raid, making her essentially his immortal captive mother. At first, their lives were fine, but soon, the mother realizes that she was trapped. She tried to kill the boy, but it didn't work either. So she ran away and remarried, but she was faced with a tragic accident, and he found her again from after news of the boat accident. The woman finally finds the sweet release of death from wounds inflicted by the deformed. In his hideout, Masato suddenly tasers Mana. He had chosen her as his new mother, but realizes that she has too much of a strong connection with Yuta, so he goes to finish Yuta first, after tying the girl with barbed wires. Masato returns to the house, where he tricks Yuta into being caught in a booby trap of piano wire which cuts deeply into his neck. Masato explains that he is over 800 years old and recounts how he used mermaid flesh to transform many women into becoming long-lived mothers to him, but they all eventually died. Finally, having found the immortal Mana, he was not going to let her go. Mana, on the other hand, escapes her bonds and arrives to save Yuta just as Masato is in the process of beheading him with an axe. Masato shoots Mana, who, as he dies, promises to kill Masato if he shoots Yuta. Suddenly, something snaps and Masato is no longer interested in Mana or Yuta and sets the house on fire before leaving in the family car. The young boy soon loses control, and as a head-on collision with a truck is imminent, he resolves to find his next companion after he comes back to life. Before they could be burned to death, Mana awakens and drags Yuta out of the house. Yuta eventually revives and finds Mana crying tears of joy. Life is strange, and so is this mermaid story, and it doesn't really seem that Yuta and Mana will ever find a way to break their curse. At least, they are alive to keep trying. If you enjoy the series, don't forget to leave a like and comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.